Hello and welcome back to the D3 Energy Livestream. I'm Greg Davis, the founder of D3 Energy. Appreciate you taking a little bit of time. I want to continue today to talk a little bit about jobs, our oil industry, and just how incredibly resilient our industry is when it comes to being there all the time to be that place where people can get a job. And I think back to my early years in the oil and gas industry when I first was introduced to the business by my father, Marvin Davis, started taking me to the office when I was 13 years old. And I got to work with some of the best oil and gas finders in the business, geologists, geophysicists, engineers, landmen, folks that worked on the rigs that designed wells. And this was back in the late 1970s, and I had the great pleasure of going to work. I was just 13, 14 years old and got to meet a lot of these guys like Gordon Healy, John Buffington, Russell Spencer, and Paul Messinger. And at the time, these men were, much younger, let's say in their 40s and 50s. And I remember after my father had sold all of his oil and gas production before 1983-84, had sold out and had timed things very well before the big downturn in the oil industry. We had a very, very big downturn in the mid-'80s where oil went from like $40 a barrel all the way to like $9 a barrel. And the industry was really flat on its back, and so many people lost their jobs. I mean, it was remarkable. And we were very fortunate to have sold beforehand, but a lot of companies really struggled to survive. And a lot of the people who worked for my father and others at that time, you would have thought that they would have left the business. And fast forward to 2000, and we had started up Davis Petroleum Corp in 1995 down in the Gulf Coast and started having success early on. And we wanted to expand back into the Rockies, back to Denver, Colorado, set up an office there. And so I went back there and started to look, who could we bring back to start up an office there? Amazingly, a lot of the men and women who had worked for Davis Oil Company in the 1970s and 80s were still at it. They had stayed in the business long after the big downturn, when most people would have said, I'm out of here, I'm finished. Well, we were able to go back and actually rehire several of the people who had worked for my father, who I had the great privilege of mentoring under and training under. Those same professionals came back and worked for us again. They were still in it. And why? Well, there was two things. One was, I asked many of them, why did you stay in the business? Why didn't you leave? And one was because my father, who did this to me, he infected all of us with the oil bug. And it was so vibrant and so exciting to work for him and in that environment and at that time that I and these folks who worked for him, who we ended up rehiring, said it was in their blood. They weren't going to do anything else. They loved the business. The other thing is, after that big downturn in our business, oil prices came back and the industry came back again. And I know in the 1990s, after we started Davis Petroleum Corp. In 1995, in 1999 there was another big downturn, and we had to weather that. And once again, folks had to ride out the storm. But the amazing thing is, most of the professionals in our industry know that our business is always going to be here, it's always going to come back, and it's always going to be a great place to get a job, a great paying job, make money, provide for your family, and is always going to be one of the greatest industries to work for. That is why so many people are still hanging around today. And I'm having the great fortune, the great pleasure of being able to work with a lot of the folks that worked for Davis Petroleum in the 1990s and through the 2000s. Our business is like that. And so here's what's amazing. What I want to talk about is jobs. Right now, our industry, amazingly so, still at, we've come down from $100 a barrel oil, and we're hit with one of the biggest downturns ever to hit our industry. So many companies went bankrupt and had to lay so many people off. And, if you looked at it, in 2015 when oil prices got to $28, $29, if you're a layman and you were from the outside, you'd say, my gosh, this business is finished, and people are going to leave and they're going to go somewhere else and they're going to find other jobs and they're quitting the industry. But not so. Why? Because our industry is so strong. And now at $50 oil, we're having what I dare to say another boom. Now, it's not as crazy as it was 2 years ago. However, more and more jobs are being created today. In fact, there is such a demand for jobs in our business that people are having trouble finding people to fill positions that will pay $1,500, $2,000 a week. In fact, $4,000 a week. $200,000 a year jobs. They're having trouble finding people to fill these positions, yet they're hiring again. And oil is only at $50 a barrel. It's getting back to what it was like when oil was $100. And why? Why is this happening? Because we are able in our industry today to make money at $50 oil. In fact, as I've been saying, at $40 a barrel oil, we're able to make money, especially in these conventional reservoirs, which I am so keen to get more activity in. And just a little anecdote. I read an article, and I'll be posting this shortly. Up in the Permian Basin, up in Midland, which was the epicenter of the boom from about 2010 up to about 2014, where there were jobs like crazy up there, and people were paying so much money. And hotel rooms were going for $300 and $400 and $500 a night at the Holiday Inn. And they were having to build man camps. I mean, the job boom was on then, and this was when oil was at $100 a barrel. One of the service companies, there's an article that I'll post, talks about a service company that provides trucks hauling services. And it used to be back in 2013-14 during the $100 boom, he could open his door in the morning, there'd be 20 candidates standing there ready to go drive or just go work on location, and get that, $1,500 to $2,000 a week job. Today, he has that same demand he could put 20 people to work right now. But it takes 2 days to find one person to fill a job. The service companies are missing out on profits right now. There's such a demand for, skilled workers, even workers that don't have great skills but are just willing to work and learn to drive a truck or learn how to sit on a well site. Halliburton and Schlumberger are having to have job fairs outside of Texas, up in Oklahoma and Colorado and other parts to try to recruit people. So the hiring boom is on again. And could oil prices go back down again? And could we have another slump? Yes. But as usual, our industry, which is so resilient, is there and adapts and figures out how to make money at any price. I'll finish by saying this story. My father told me a story about in the 1970s. He went down to the Davis Oil offices in New Orleans, and when he got off the plane and got in the cab, he was riding to the office there. And he was minding his own business, but he noticed that the cab driver was looking back at him and kind of inquisitive and smiling. And my father said, "Do I know you?" And the geologist says, or the geologist, that's the punchline. The cab driver said, "I know you. You're Mr. Davis, right?" My father said, "Yes, how do I know you?" And he said, "Well, I'm Joe Smith, and I'm a geologist." And my father looked at me and said, "I know you, Joe. What the heck are you doing driving a cab?" And he said, "Well, I was laid off because I guess there was another little mini price drop back then, or companies were rejiggering and letting people go." He said, I got laid off." And my father said, "Man, I'm sorry to hear that." He said, "What are you going to do now? Are you going to leave? Are you going to go somewhere else? Are you going to go try another business?" And he said, "No, Mr. Davis. I'm just going to drive this cab long enough until I get hired again." And you know what? My father ended up seeing that same guy, that geologist who was a cab driver, back in business again after things picked up again. And my father always used to say, "This is such a great business," okay? And it is. That's the truth. And amazingly, jobs are coming back right now, as usual, as most likely we all should have predicted. When our business goes flat on its back, everybody gets back up and figures out how to do it cheaper, how to do it better, and that's what we're doing right now, and the jobs are available. Companies like Halliburton, Schlumberger, these small companies in the Permian, and it's starting to go up in Colorado again. It's starting to happen down here in Houston again, down in South Texas, that there is a shortage of labor. And just a reminder, our industry is one of the biggest employers in the United States, 10 million jobs. Okay, and the average job pays about $80,000 a year. A truck driver can make $200,000 a year. Where else can you find that? And my last point is, conventional is starting to come up now. People are starting to go back. Companies are starting to go back and applying all this great technology that's been developed during the shale boom. And with these lower oil prices, figuring out how to get oil out for less, cheaper, faster, better, that's starting to be applied in these conventional trends. And there's many places right now that I know of, that we know of, where activity is picking up, and people are going to be needed in those areas. So that's it for today. Jobs, our industry, the resilience, strong, America hydrocarbon dominant today, and we're growing. Help me to keep building this momentum. Help us keep America, the American oil and gas industry, the dominant industry that it is, to continue to build this momentum. Please share this video with your friends, and I'll be back again shortly. And I'll be posting some articles to support some of the things that I talked about today that I hope that you'll find interesting. Thank you.